Well, we tried to work collectively with a broad representation from all three countries, Canada, the United States, and Mexico. We were looking at really NAFTA that many years, more than 10 years after it came into effect, saying, you know, what should be the next steps? Where can we go from here, if anywhere? And there was a broad range of views, certainly among the people that the Council on Foreign Relations asked to be part of that.
The Council did not endorse it, because the Council doesn't endorse the work of its task force, and they didn't hold any, public meetings on it. But it was, they I think, went beyond anything that has been occurred in the Trilateral or Bilderberg in analyzing the merits in this paper they produced on this task force.
I think that we struggled a lot with this basic question. I mean, do you want to be, bold and brash? Do you want to be incremental? Do you need a common view for all three countries? Can there be a common goal, but moving at different speeds? And so, we tackled a lot of those issues. We tried to make, I think, a contribution to the direction that countries might go. At the end of the day, has a lot been accomplished? Not really. But, sometimes these things take time to bear fruit.
What are your thoughts on a North American union between Canada, America, and Mexico?
I don't know. I think with the free trade agreement, we pretty much have that right now, don't we? So there's no point, you're just going to change the name. It's the same thing already that we have.
Well, I don't agree with it. I mean, we've already got the NAFTA agreement with Mexico and the United States.
Pienso que es una relación que nos afecta pues a toda la comunidad mexicana. Pues yo pienso que primero se tendrían que establecer claramente en qué nos beneficiaría y en qué nos afectaría. Pues más que nada yo pienso que pedir la opinión de la comunidad de cada país, que al fin y al cabo pues somos los que más resentimos ese tipo de unión.
Pues considero que no ayudaría nada a México porque resulta de que nuestro dinero nunca vale.
I don't think it's really a good thing at all because, what does that mean for Canada and where Canadian citizens stand?
I don't see them coordinating any kind of understanding that everyone can be on common ground with. And the corruption too. Who gets what? Who's going to provide the leadership? Who get, you don't know how society exists these days. It's very difficult to get any kind of truth.
It's obvious that there is another agenda going on here. If this was something that was for everybody's benefit, it would be front page news. But because it's not, because it is secretive, you got to ask why.
Why the secrecy? Why wouldn't they tell us about this?
Well, because the corporate interests are basically the ones that are benefiting from this. And if anybody looked at the actual amalgamation and what they have proposed, they'll see that it's only good for the corporations.
Do you think it would be beneficial for people or more beneficial for corporations?
That's a tough question. I'm hopeful that it'd be more beneficial for people, but my feeling would be that it's probably going to benefit more corporations.
Well, I think as an American and all other Americans should agree that it's obviously a plan to destroy national sovereignty.
I think that if we're going to adopt laws from other countries, then we should have a say on it.
I've heard about that, but I think it's going to be bad.
In the event of a financial meltdown or any type of economic disaster, borders contain that disaster to that specific nation. And when you eliminate all borders, how do you contain things? You don't. I'm 16th generation Canadian. And you know what? I love our neighbors to the south. I really do. And I'd like them to remain our neighbors to the south.
We have more control of our own destiny when we're not worrying about the other factors, the other people in our union. So if you're worrying about the Mexicans, what they might hold important, we may not. So I think we can get along with them and do business with them, but I think it's better to do it as an individual rather than as separate or as a union together. That's my personal opinion.
It's almost inevitable, I would say, that happening.
Why do you think it's inevitable?
everybody's becoming more interconnected these days, I think.
I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Concerned.
You're concerned about the future?
Definitely.
Yeah, no, me too. Yeah, me too.
The North American Union is an idea essentially put forth by the Council on Foreign Relations. They wrote a document called Building a North American Community, and they're a think tank of about 2,000 or 3,000 of the business and political elite in the United States who have common interests. Those common interests aren't really defined much to the public, but you can go to CFR.org to see the CFR's own website. You can do your own primary source research by going to their website, looking at their publications, and seeing what their members decide would be a good idea to see. Now, they don't have any official political power, though a lot of their members are politicians. So what they do is they are a think tank of the business and political elite who come up with plans that the government adopts without the say of the rest of the public.
Up until about 6 years ago, we never saw in major U.S. papers or Canadian papers never a mention of Bilderberg. Now it's finally all over the place. Europe, it's all over the place. What is that a sign of? What is that a sign of that this is happening?
It's a sign that an independent press is growing. What I don't know is, are enough of the public listening? That's my great prayer, is that enough of the public are listening. Because you can keep telling them, I can keep telling them, but is there enough of the public going to listen against the tidal wave of trash media? You know, all the cheap thrill stuff, all the commercial stuff. Are people really going to learn what's going on? Because what is happening to the United States, to Canada, to Mexico is terrible, terrible, terrible stuff.
Can you talk about the American Union? I mean, the CFR writes the white papers for their agenda. They carry out Bilderberg's orders. That's on record. And even Lou Dobbs on CNN saying, American Union, end of Canada, end of U.S. They are actually, through the trade deals, already starting to bleed us.
Well, I breezed through what in Canada we've referred to as the Manley Report. John Manley was a previous Deputy Prime Minister, and he sat on a Council of Foreign Relations committee with Mexicans and Americans. And it started off by saying, does it not make sense that Canada and the U.S. should be one, that we should have a common currency? Does it not just make enormous sense that we should have a common border? To ask the question is to answer it. Now that was right in the report. I know they're just waiting for us to look the other way so they can whisk it through.
They're upset about the fact that they're being exposed.
Well, I'm sure they are. I mean, look at the tinted windows. They don't want to be seen. They don't want even anybody to know they're here. So I'm sure they're ticked, you know, and that's why we're here to try to expose them.
The American Union is happening through trade deals. Just like the Euro back in the 50s when they first set it up was this economic community or this trade bloc. Now it's the Euro, and now they're taking people's right to vote, taking their sovereignty, giving it to these supranational organizations. So we're talking about the death of Canada is what's happening in there right now. The death of your sovereignty is happening in there right now. CNN has even reported that these individuals have put out the policy reports through the Council on Foreign Relations that writes their scholarly white papers to end the United States, to end Canada, and to end Mexico.
What is biometric identification, and how would this be applied in North America?
Well, biometric identification is using the characteristics which are unique to each individual as a means of identifying who they are. And we currently use it between Canada and the United States as part of the Nexus program, where we have iris scan identification. So at airports, if you're a holder of a Nexus card, you can go and put your eye in front of a machine, and it reads your iris and it spits out a card saying who you are. And you can use that with your customs declaration form. So it's just a means of certain identification. There are different ways of doing that, but that's an example of one.
That was kind of the thing that people mentioned. They said, you know, this is one more step towards an Orwellian state of everyone being on a database or something like that.
I've got news for them. They are already on a database.
Oh, really?
They are.
Which database?
Well, have they got a credit card?
Yeah.
Well, they're on a database. What are you most concerned about? Identity theft, or the fact that you might be on a database when you're already on a database? I think, quite frankly, your privacy is more likely to be breached by virtue of the information you supply credit card companies in order to acquire credit than by any linkage of your information to your biometrics. At least you know where you've got biometric identification, identity theft becomes almost impossible. And increasingly, for many people, identity theft is a nightmare. Once it happens to you, you never want it to happen again. So in a modern world, you know, every technology has its upsides and its downsides, and for some of the benefits, sometimes there are some compromises.